The unknown health risks of EMF radiation. I understand the advantages of technology, but as a mother, I am concerned about the negative health impacts of the increasing amount of radio frequency radiation on our children and our environment. I am very much aware that we cannot run away or stop it all, but what we can do is educate ourselves, so that we can at least reduce the amount of radio frequency radiation around us. This is what inspired me to do this presentation.
In the 1930s, they said asbestos was safe. In the 1950s, they said tobacco was safe. In the 1960s, they said DDT was safe. From the 2000s, they say cell phones are safe. Today, they say 5G is safe.
My name is Ira Brown. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I have glioblastoma brain cancer. I was diagnosed in 2011. I was an excessive cell phone user, 5, 6, 7 hours a day consistently for years, and I got glioblastoma from that thing. Basically, I'm a caution optimist. I do believe I have to go a little slow because my brain doesn't work like normal people's do because of my tumor. But I'm not against progress. I'm just against dangerous progress. There's other ways to make it safe. You could do landline. You can create an infrastructure of optical. You can create even more jobs, more workforce with creating an optical infrastructure for these companies. Having it close, it's very nerve-wracking for glioblastoma brain cancer patients. Very. Thank you very much for your time. For our children. Thank you.
Now, some cancer survivors are calling for governments to take the drastic step of banning all mobile phone use for children under 16 and for the rest of us to text instead of call. Laura Sparks has this exclusive report.
My tumour was just here, hence there's a scar there.
The tumour's in the left frontal lobe, which was basically around there.
It was like there.
About that big, just here.
You start at the ear and go straight into your brain, and that's your auditory nerve, and it grows around that.
What are EMF, EMR and RFR? Electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic radiation, and radio frequency radiation are general terms covering the emission of non-ionizing radiation from all wireless devices, such as cell phones, cell towers, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth devices, iPads, smart meters, smart watches, baby monitors, etc.
In 2011, the World Health Organization classified radio frequency electromagnetic fields, including Wi-Fi and cell phone signals, as possibly carcinogenic to humans. Some scientists say radio frequency waves don't cause cancer, but more and more experts in the field are coming forward expressing concern. The American Academy of Pediatrics, along with the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, are urging the FCC to adopt up-to-date radiation standards. Current standards are 20 years old and don't account for a child's use. More than a dozen scientists and pediatric neurology experts from Harvard to the California Brain Tumor Association have written letters to MCPS, joining the parent organization in urging the school system to switch to wired technology.
Here you can see the telecommunications inverted pyramid of power. At the top, ICNIRP, World Health Organization, UNICEF, Rockefeller Foundation, FDA, FCC, and others. And at the bottom, you.
But in the fine print of the World Health Organisation's latest report, it states that heavy users of mobile phones, now that's people that use mobile phones for half an hour a day for more than 10 years, triple their risk of getting a brain tumour.
Countries rely on different guidelines to determine radiofrequency radiation safety, and schools will often say that there is no health risk at school because they are within the safety guidelines. ICNIRP and FCC's safety guidelines are based on a 50-year-old heat calculation, commonly known as a microwave oven effect, the point at which electromagnetic radiation heats body tissue. South Africa and many other countries rely on ICNIRP's guidelines. America uses FCC's, which is similar. Here you can see Russia and China's safety guidelines are 100 times lower and based not only on heat effects, but on adverse biological effects. The international building biologists recommend that the safety limit is set 1 million times lower to not impact negatively on us and the environment. Scientists indicate that many different illnesses such as cancer, reproductive and neurological problems, DNA damage, and harm to animals and insects are caused, without heating, at radiation levels well below ICNIRP safety guideline levels. Therefore, schools cannot rely on these guidelines, and therefore new safety standards are critical.
I'm Dr. Martin Blank from the Department of Physiology and Cellular Biophysics at Columbia University. It is distressing for me and more than 160 colleagues who today are petitioning the United Nations requesting that they address this problem. We are scientists and engineers, and I am here to tell you we have created something that is harming us, and it is getting out of control. Before Edison's light bulb, there was very little electromagnetic radiation in our environment. The levels today are very many times higher than natural background levels and are growing rapidly because of all the new devices that emit this radiation. An example that a lot of us have in our pockets right now is the cell phone. One study shows that as cell phone usage has spread widely, the incidence of fatal brain cancer in younger people has more than tripled. We are putting cellular antennas on residential buildings and on top of hospitals where people are trying to get well. Wireless utility meters and cell towers are blanketing our neighborhoods with radiation.
In April 2020, 254 scientists from 44 different countries signed an international EMF scientist appeal to the United Nations and World Health Organization, calling for protection from non-ionizing radiofrequency radiation from cell phones, base stations, cell towers, iPads, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. The appeal addresses the scientifically proven effects on health and the inadequate international guidelines from ICNIRP to date and their use by the World Health Organization.
But when you add the animal study from the National Toxicology Program, the combined evidence, in my view, is that there is now sufficient evidence that radiofrequency radiation is carcinogenic to humans. That's IR category 1, and you can't ignore that.
So you have a revolving door between the wireless lobby and the FCC Commission. So that's what's happening. Plus, the science is heavily influenced by industry funding. This is a study by Dr. Henry Lai. He looked at 326 studies based on the biological effects of cell phone radiation. He found that about half of the studies showed effects and half didn't. That's pretty normal for this type of research. But what he found that was interesting was that if you looked at who funded the studies, 70% of the independent studies showed effects, and only 32% of the industry-funded studies showed effects. So you see that there's an influence in money on this topic. Just like many other topics, tobacco is another one where essentially the industry funded science that was going to show their products were safe.
One of the things that people often say to me is that it's all very well for you to say this, but there haven't been reports of increases in these cancers in the various countries where the studies have been done. Well, this is wrong. Phillips and his colleagues have this year reported this increase in the most severe form of glioma, glioma 4, glioblastoma multiforme, the red line going up with time in the United Kingdom. And these tumours are the ones where you would expect the maximum exposure from cell phone use in the temporal lobe and the frontal lobe of the brain. And that's very important.
We're beginning to see some evidence coming through in the tumor registry data. I think we will see increasing evidence over time. The country Israel, for example, has already shown substantial increases in parotid gland tumors in their tumor registry data.
Here we take a drop of blood, put it on a slide, and view it under the microscope. The top slide shows my blood before I was exposed to Wi-Fi. The cells are round and free-floating in small, loose groupings. The slide at the bottom shows what happens to my blood when I spend 10 minutes exposed to Wi-Fi. Every cell on the slide is sticking together. This type of blood is unable to efficiently deliver oxygen and nutrients to cells and get rid of waste products produced by cells. And it's called rouleau formation. Dr. Stephen Sinatra, a world-renowned cardiologist, says that our blood should have the consistency of red wine. Instead, most of us have blood with the consistency of ketchup flowing through our veins. This is rouleau formation. Symptoms include headaches, fatigue, dizziness, difficulty concentrating, numbness, tingling and cold extremities, heart and blood pressure problems, and, in severe cases, heart attacks and strokes. This study showed that adults who used a cell phone for more than 1,640 hours over a 10-year period had a 40% increased risk of developing a brain tumor called a glioma. How does this exposure compare to Wi-Fi in schools? Interesting. And yet we are told that Wi-Fi in schools is safe?
The SAR value of the iPad on Wi-Fi is higher than most phones, and the higher the value, the more RFEM energy is absorbed by the human body. In a real-life test, an iPhone and an iPad were measured using an RF EMR meter. First, the iPhone. A call was put through, and the measurement was taken on talk mode. The meter peaked at 19 with a continuous signal for the duration of the call. Let's compare this to an iPad using Wi-Fi. In this video, the Wi-Fi is turned on, but it's not downloading anything or surfing the internet. Even so, the iPad peaks at 70, which is over 3 times higher than the iPhone on talk mode. This signal is intermittent and spikes every few seconds for as long as the Wi-Fi is on. So how much time do we spend using these Wi-Fi enabled tablets? It's likely to be a lot longer than the time spent talking on the phone. If you're playing games or surfing the internet, it could possibly be for hours every day.
Besides the radio frequency risks, there are other risks to consider as well. For example, from the lighting from the screens, the overstimulation from these devices, the multitasking effects. There is no evidence that use of technology in the classroom improves learning or performance. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Some studies show neutral, no effects. Others show significantly worsened performance.
Many researchers feel that the tech addiction we are seeing in children is related to software designs that create bursts of dopamine.
An adult human being can consent to being involved in a trial where they are exposed to RF as long as they are fully informed of the present level of science on risk. But a child can't do that. And the children we currently have in school are generally non-benefiting, but they're certainly non-consenting. They have no idea how much science is out there that says that this is putting their biology at risk. And they haven't given consent to be irradiated by a Wi-Fi router or by a phone or by an iPad. That's an unethical position. When we look at memory, concentration, learning and behaviour, all things that are really important in an educational setting, we can see that RF has properties which can damage that. And compounding that is the social distraction. So we have a double whammy, if you like, of issues with kids at school, where the RF itself is having effects on their central nervous system, which can impair their ability to learn and their behaviour and their memory.
But the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation wants a moratorium on Wi-Fi in the Limestone School Board. The teacher union's president says there is a growing mountain of evidence that Wi-Fi can pose health risks, concerns that Andrea Loken is taking to school trustees.
There are thousands of published peer-reviewed papers that are indicating adverse health effects from Wi-Fi. And we are seeing an increasing awareness around this issue worldwide.
Loken says countries like France, Israel, and Italy are all taking steps to ban Wi-Fi in schools and daycares.
Why is the government not putting on the brakes? In 2015, the Federal Communication Commission made $45 billion selling a part of the wireless spectrum. The government didn't want to put a ban on tobacco sales because they were receiving a lot of money from tobacco taxes. The same seems to be the case with wireless.
You have 5 minutes, ma'am. Please proceed.
And committee members, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Sharon Goldberg. I'm an internal medicine physician. I've practiced medicine for 21 years, and my background is mostly academic, internal medicine, hospital-based, clinical research, and medical education. I am going to skip many of the things I wanted to say because I didn't realize it was only 5 minutes. Wireless radiation has biological effects, period. This is no longer a subject for debate when you look at PubMed and the peer-reviewed literature. These effects are seen in all life forms: plants, animals, insects, microbes. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There is no question. We have evidence of DNA damage, cardiomyopathy, which is the precursor of congestive heart failure, neuropsychiatric effects. So 5G is not a conversation about whether or not these biological effects exist. They clearly do. 5G is a conversation about unsustainable healthcare expenditures. Why do I say this? We've been sitting on the evidence for EMR and chronic disease for decades. And now we are seeing all these epidemics appearing. So diabetes is the first epidemic. I think most of you know the statistics. They're very scary. 1 in 3 American children will become diabetic in their lifetime, and if they're Hispanic females, the number is 1 in 2. Okay. So what does this have to do with wireless radiation? Wireless radiation and other electromagnetic fields, such as magnetic fields and dirty electricity, have been clearly associated with elevated blood sugar and diabetes. That is what the peer-reviewed literature says. It is not opinion. The closer you live to a cell tower, the higher your blood glucose. That is based on hemoglobin A1C measurements. So the idea with small cells of putting the cells closer to people's homes and bedrooms scientifically is very dangerous. And from an economic perspective, it's dangerous. And you may not know this. I was shocked to find this out. But the way you create a model of diabetes in rats in the lab is by exposing them to 2.4 gigahertz. And this is not for long-term exposure. The other epidemics that clearly link from the science with electromagnetic radiation are related to mental health. And this is straight from PubMed. This isn't my opinion. This is science. We have deterioration of mental health in the United States. And if you look really at the science, what does it show? And these epidemics are suicide epidemic, epidemics in violent, shootings, and the opioid epidemic. And I don't have 5 minutes is not the time to talk about this. This is in the peer-reviewed literature. I have a file to submit for the record. But these are facts. These aren't, and these are things that have just been glossed over by the wireless industry. And I really don't have time to talk about them in 5 minutes. I wish I did. But we need to examine our epidemics in the context of our EMF exposures. What does that mean? That means that the CDC, tracking these epidemics, we need to start measuring how much radiation are people being exposed to. And before we roll out 5G, and this means there are 4 kinds of electromagnetic fields that we know are harmful to human health. So radio frequency radiation, magnetic fields, dirty electricity, and electric fields. okay? Our exposure, any given person, and all humans are affected by EMFs. Our given exposure has nothing to do with the research that my colleagues are going to cite, with the National Toxicology Program. That is an assessment of the risk of one cell phone in the near field, okay? What is our exposure in a day? It's not one cell phone. It's cell phones, it's multiple wireless networks, it's smart meters, it's cell towers. It's this sandwich, and it all adds up. And this is a serious problem for occupational health, public safety, and personal safety. And I feel that it's irresponsible to be even talking about the Internet of Things and rolling out a new untested technology when we're not even measuring what are our current exposures from the current networks.
What are we to make of the American Cancer Society, for example, telling us there's no evidence of harmful product?
Well, at this point, there's a national and international 5G appeal. I don't know how many thousands of people have signed. But the point is that many of these organizations have conflicts of interest. The FCC guidelines were developed for short-term exposures, 6 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on it's a phone or an outdoor exposure. And they have absolutely no connection to the biological effects that have been very clearly summarized in the Bio Initiative. That's a huge document generated. All of the summaries are there. And I've got it here for you if anyone wants to read it. I have very concise summaries and abstracts documenting everything that I'm saying.
And with me here today, I have Professor Paul Leroux. Professor Leroux is a physicist and a toxicologist. He used to work for the industry on the health effects of electromagnetic fields and radiation until he understood the harms associated with this technology. Then he expanded his medical knowledge and became a toxicologist, and now he's a professor in the medical school of McGill University in Canada, teaching courses about the health effects of electromagnetic fields and radiation. To my left here is Dr. James Zarbron. Dr. James Zarbron is actually a doctor in the state of Michigan. And after he heard that I'm here, he contacted me because he has seen an epidemic of sickness in his clinic from wireless technology radiation. And the funny thing is that, while people are getting sick, they go to a doctor. Unfortunately, what's really going on now, doctors like Dr. Zarbron actually refer them back to engineers because they have to go to their home and disable the wireless devices in order for these people to get better. And once these wireless devices are being disabled, they are getting better. And again, we're not talking about a small group of people with some kind of odd responses, abnormal responses to this technology. Please remember, we are electric beings. Our brain is electric. Our nervous system is electric. Our heart is electric. Our cells communicate electrically. So the question is not how come this technology and radiation can affect us. The question is how can it not affect us? Let's talk about cancer. So one of the wireless industry people here mentioned that he's from Indiana. This week, the wife of the ex-governor of Indiana was diagnosed with glioblastoma. Same brain tumor Ted Kennedy had and John McCain had. Did you look at John McCain's scar? This is a cell phone brain tumor. LeBron James, one of our sports people, had a salivary gland tumor. That is another cell phone tumor. You didn't hear about it because immediately after that was discovered, he was paid by Samsung to become their spokesperson. Now, the 4 top diseases that kill our children, our young adults right now, are brain tumors, thyroid cancer, testis cancer, rectal cancer, everywhere we put our cell phones. Breast cancer. We suddenly have breast cancer in women who have no DNA predisposition to have breast tumor. And funny enough, they had a very odd distribution of their tumors. They usually resemble the shape of the cell phone, the way they used to put the cell phone in a bra. Reproductive harm. There is a significant decrease in the quality of sperm in male in the past 10 to 15 years. There are dozens and dozens of studies that show beyond any doubt what this radiation is doing to our sperm. For example, the previous chairman of the FCC is Tom Wheeler. He was the head of the Wireless Lobby Association for 14 years. Now remember, Obama told us there would be no lobbyists in his administration, so he took the biggest lobby and put him as a head of the FCC. The FCC is a capture agency. They probably conducted what I believe to be the biggest fraud on the public ever conducted.
Thank you for having this hearing. We've heard from a lot of witnesses from you today and others previously about the very important potential of 5G technology. It promises to bring us a new era of connectivity with internet speeds as much as 5 times faster than what we have today with much lower latency, and that's all a good thing. But 5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implications to those additional sites that are likely to be located close to homes, schools, workplaces, and closer to the ground? Correct?
Correct, Senator. Yes.
So in December of 2018, I sent a letter to FCC Commissioner Carr asking him to cite for me recent scientific studies demonstrating the safety of this technology. What research has been done, where has it been published and compiled? He has essentially failed to do so, and just echoed the general statements of the FDA, which shares regulatory responsibility for cell phones with the FCC. If you go to the FDA website, pretty unsatisfactory. There basically is a cursory and superficial citation to existing scientific data saying, quote, the FDA has urged the cell phone industry to take a number of steps, including support additional research on possible biological effects of radio frequency fields for the type of signal emitted by cell phones. My question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Perry, how much money has the industry committed to supporting additional independent research? I stress independent research. Is that independent research ongoing? Has any been completed? Where can consumers look for it? And we're talking about research on the biological effects of this new technology.
Thank you, Senator. I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, we rely on the findings of the FDA and others as to the requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
Senator, I'm not aware either, but I do know that with small cells especially, you're going to have lower power levels. And of course, as from a carrier perspective, you want to be able to manage interference so that that interference is the lowest interference possible. So I would think that some of those studies or some of that information could be utilized in looking at health consequences. But no, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned.
I want to tackle the subject of insurance. You know that neither Lloyd's of London nor Swiss Re will underwrite liability policies for electromagnetic radiation because they think the health risk is too great.
5G fifth generation technology promises faster download speeds and conveniences that most of us have never dreamed of, but will also be blanketed with a new type of radiation called millimetre waves. Health experts are warning about the rising risks with a 5G rollout.
What would 5G infrastructure look like? Small cell antennas could be placed as close as every third hydro pole. Scientists from 42 countries are now warning their governments about the emerging health problems associated with wireless radiation, and Canadian doctors and scientists have added their voices. Dr. Magda Havas is internationally recognized for her research on the biological effects of electromagnetic pollution. She said that at high intensities, these waves cause intense heat and pain because sweat glands on the surface of our skin act like mini antennas.
At lower frequencies, scientists are predicting damage to eyes, loss of insect populations which are already declining, antibiotic resistance in bacteria, and physiological effects on the nervous system and on the immune system.
Radiation from radio frequencies is classed in the same category of carcinogens as lead. One advisor to the World Health Organization said there's enough evidence that if they were to re-evaluate radio frequency radiation,
it would be placed in class 1, i.e. a human carcinogen, and governments could not possibly ignore that.
So you're talking about serious effects to our skin and our nerves and venerate our skin, so you're talking about affecting our entire neurological system and exposing our eyes to military-grade wireless radiation, and our eyes have no natural defense against this. So you're talking about putting this in front of people's homes, forcing it into their rooms. This is absolutely absurd. We have video from the FCC proceedings with one of the 5G engineers saying themselves, look, we are forcing these directed beams into people's windows at levels that we do not allow in our labs, in our safety labs. This is absolutely absurd, and the FCC shrugged it off and said, this isn't an issue we need to be discussing today.
Okay, thank you. Who should be held responsible? Those in responsible positions in governments and organizations, including schools, and those expected to protect the public and the environment from harm, but you fail to do so by ignoring the increasing warnings from scientists worldwide about the dangers of radio frequency radiation and 5G. How can we reduce the radiation around us? Here are just a few tips. Cell phones on speaker, not next to your head, on airplane mode wherever possible, and not kept in your pocket or your bra. Distance is your friend. Wi-Fi routers on timers where possible, off during the night when you sleep and don't need it anyway. iPads and laptops not on your lap, even if hardwired. Use wired instead of wireless, and make sure wireless connectivity is off on devices and router. Optical fiber is a much safer and faster option. Join the 5G appeal started by Dr. Nyberg and Dr. Hardell.
Use my phone about 2 hours a day.
The area that it was here, and I mean, you put two and two together.
I just hope it's in my lifetime that phone companies are held accountable for this damage. I just would hate for people watching this right now in 10 years' time to go, far out, why didn't I take note? Why didn't I listen?